to the Award 5 at-large race. The
award.
3 candidates on November 5th. 2 will be elected to serve 2 years. So let's meet the candidates. First, to my right here, is Deborah Crosley. Deb has been a member of first the Board of Aldermen, now the City Council for 10 years. She's an architect, and she's an environmental activist. She's working to, in her words, better steward the community. Deb is a member of the Land Use Committee. She chairs the Public Facilities Committee, and she wants to promote smarter city planning, wise energy policy, and strategic plans to better manage city assets. And Deb has worked to advance clean energy and upgrades. So Deb Crossley. Next is Andreae Downs. Andreae, you would be running for your 2nd term on the City Council. You are well known as a former Waban area councilor. You've championed safe streets, walkable village centers. In your 1st term, you worked to fight for clearer sidewalks, better parking management, and connecting off-road trails to transit. That's your specialty. You have a newsletter, you have constituent office hours, and you work with constituents to understand what's happening on the council and to get their local issues resolved. And finally, we have Paul Coletti, a longtime Newton resident, and he was an alderman for many, many years. He has 3 kids, all educated in NPS, and he has a couple of grandkids who are going to be going to NPS. You were chairman of the Finance Committee for more than 20 years, and you are making a comeback of sorts. You say that all citizens need to become active in city problems and solutions, and to try to make a positive difference before it is too late. So we will talk to the candidates and get their positions and their issues of interest. Let's start with Deb. Deb, talk to me about your background, your education, your life experience, and why that makes you an effective representative for not only Ward 5, obviously, but the whole city.
Well, before I served as a city councilor, which has been 10 years now, I was very active in the community as a citizen volunteer and activist in the Newton Public Schools with my husband, raising our 2 children, with the League of Women Voters, serving 20 years on the board, with the Newton Energy Commission, the Pomeroy Foundation Board, the Mayor's Comprehensive Planning Committee, and even the High Performance Building Coalition. Okay. My education, I'm an architect and an environmental science major, and I do bring that to my work.
All right, thank you, Deb. Andreae, is there a current or a past city councilor who really inspired you to run for office or to serve residents of this city? What motivated you a couple of years ago to say, hey, I'm going to get involved in this, and to spend money and a lot of time, and it's a big investment. Why do it?
It's true. It is a big investment, but I thought it was worth doing. I was, I have to say, partly inspired by the 2016 election to be more involved. I had been chairing the Transportation Advisory Group for about 6 years, and we had produced plans for better parking management, for a bicycle network plan, for several other, for better walkability, for other ways to make our streets and our sidewalks safer. And we had really gotten to a point where I had taken it about as far as I could without having a vote on the council. And so I decided to run, in part because that I could advance that further.
And similar question to Alderman Coletti. You've been not a member of the board for several years now, but you're choosing to try and make a comeback. What motivates you?
Well, I was one of a few people who decided, when I ran for mayor back in 2009, to give up my seat. I did that because after some contentious times with the budget, trying to get things like the bonding passed for Newton North High School and trying to keep the city's AAA bond rating, I came to the conclusion at that point that one person could no longer make a difference. And I believed that and figured that if you were going to have to make a difference, you needed to be the person at the top. I was not successful, but at the same time, over the past few years and seeing the way the city is moving, I've now determined that every person has to make a difference, because I'm not pleased with, and I think some of the discussion we'll have this evening point to the fact that I am not pleased with the representation that we have.
All right, and we will obviously get back to that. Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty, and just a reminder that Councilors Downs and Crosley will not be able to comment specifically on the Northland project because they are members, they are quasi-judicial judges, if you will, to that project, which is now before the City Council. That said, we can
I make a comment on that?
you're going to get a chance to talk about that as well. Without delving into the specifics of the Northland project, tell me why you believe that the city should increase high-density residential, affordable housing, at least in the areas of certain village centers. Why are you an advocate for that?
I'll tell you, but I also want to say we can discuss some of the specifics of the project, those which have been in the public realm already. There's a lot of information that's out there. What we can't do is say whether we support or oppose the project until we are through the process.
But let's just go in general.
Sure.
In general. You supported Washington Place, you supported Austin Street. Those votes are done, those buildings are up.
I did.
Why?
As I said, I served on the Mayor's Comprehensive Planning Advisory Committee, and the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2007 by the previous Board of Aldermen. And it tells us that we have very limited opportunity for commercial development in the city or mixed-use development in the city. 3 commercial corridors, Washington Street, Route 9, and Needham Street. Needham Street and Washington Street, at least at that time, very much in a state of deterioration, needing renewal and so forth. And we have the Riverside site.
Okay.
That's it. That's all we have.
We'll get back to this. Let me ask Andrea. Councilor Downs, you've been also a proponent of increased density around village centers. Let me ask you this. How much more can we grow? When will we know that we've done enough? Obviously not with specific numbers, but how do we know when it's time to sort of go in another direction and say, okay, we need to be very, very careful about how much we grow, how fast we grow?
So let me start by saying I really value, and one of the reasons we moved to Newton was because it was economically diverse. It was not a gated community. And when we are developing the areas where we can develop more commercial, but also add the feet on the street that are essential for that commercial to succeed, we also need to be adding more housing so that we're not displacing our current residents.
Okay. We're going to have to, we'll get back to that. I wanted to ask.
Right population, just for a point of reference while we're doing numbers, our current population is about 88,000.
Yeah.
In 1960, it was 92,000.
Right.
With fewer housing units. The size of our households has decreased.
We can get back into that. We've got to try to keep the answers to 30 seconds or so. Alderman Coletti, you had a point that I think you wanted to make about the special permitting process.
Just quickly as a point, in all the years that I served, which was 32 years, there was never an opinion ever rendered that, especially after a public hearing is held on a land use item, as long as you don't tell someone before the committees actually vote on an item, you can speak to all the issues associated with it, the public welfare benefits, the arbitrary and capriciousness of an item, so that the citizens have an understanding, because they're asking you, and we've always talked about that 16 is the critical number to get a special permit and 18 to get a zone change. And the secret of being successful as an opponent is to talk to 8 aldermen and get their votes. And if you can't hear what they're talking about, then how can you even decide who's going to be supporting your position? The other answer to your question is, I think we have to
keep it to 30 seconds.
Yeah, this is on the height of, I think in the 13.
We'll get into the height.
Well, I thought you asked me that question.
Yeah, but we have to keep we're going to keep this almost like soundbite
I can do it in 2
length.
seconds.
Go ahead.
In
seconds.
commercial districts, the villages, I think we should have a zoning restriction to no more than 3 stories.
All right.
And I think that in terms of the bigger projects, no building should be built in the city taller than the Gateway Center. So it should be under 6 stories.
Let me ask Councilor Crosley, would you agree with that? 3 stories max?
I don't think we should be drawing lines in the sand without understanding the context of a particular development. I do agree with former Alderman Coletti that we can express ourselves in public completely thoroughly when it's a public meeting on any development. We can talk about any of the issues that we have made public in those forums, but not our votes and not whether we oppose or support.
Councilor Downs, and this is on a similar subject matter. Governor Baker has had a proposal out there for a while now that would amend the state law so that a municipality, when acting on a special permit, would just need a simple majority to approve, rather than what we have as now here in Newton is a supermajority or 2/3, which can make it very difficult. What is your position on Governor Baker's proposal? Do you think that a 2/3 majority is appropriate, or would you like to see it reduced to a simple majority?
So, as I understand it, Governor Baker's proposal is not viable, and he's back revising it. It does seem like we make it very difficult to improve our commercial base and also add density that would support it. Because, you know, in the city altogether, it's just very expensive and time-consuming to get stuff done, even down to dormers and mudrooms on our current single-family homes, because our zoning is so outdated.
Alderman Coletti, 24 city councilors. Do you think that's a good number? Would you like to see it reduced? What would you, there was a proposal to go 8 and 8, 8 ward only, 8 at large from each ward. That didn't seem to go anywhere. What is your thought on the composition of the city council?
I would just say that since 1977, when I was first elected, the city of Newton, for over 250 years, had 24 members because the participation of the citizens is so critical on these items that come before it. Having been one of the only people in the city in 1986, I served on the Middlesex County Charter Commission for 2 years on whether to abolish county government. I was Newton's representative. And at that point, I was one of only 9 people who wasn't a county employee, and we were able to convince the entire county to abolish county government. So I have been someone who was able to get anachronisms and other kinds of, like Middlesex County as a system of government, gotten rid of. In Newton, we need the 24 aldermen.
Right. Thank you.
I'll give up my other speaking time if I can just
No,
answer
just
the rest
keep
of
it
the
to
question.
30 seconds or a little bit more. Go ahead.
I would just
Wrap
tell
it.
you that there's a time to fight the size of government, and there's a time that you absolutely need it. And when you think that it takes 16, a special permit is granting value to somebody. And it should take a supermajority of aldermen to be able to do that outside of what you can do by right.
So you support
I
the
support
current law.
24, and hopefully it'll always stay that way.
Let's talk about commercial. That's the city's commercial base, which is not what it should be. I think everyone can agree on that. What would Councilor Deborah Crosley recommend the city do to increase its commercial tax base and take some of the pressure off of homeowners who pay the bulk of taxes?
Well, I really think we need to have a stronger citywide conversation about this, because, everybody says they want more commercial development. On the one hand, as people have said, you need feet on the street in order to support the commercial development we have, because it's spread around the city in our 13 villages. On the other hand, when we have the one site we have where we know we can put we could put a tremendous amount of commercial development is the Riverside site, and people are fighting tooth and nail against that. They're saying, in fact, today, I know that project is in flux, but what I understand is the opposition now is saying we want it to be mostly or all residential, because that reduces car trips, even though it's right on the highway, right on transit, and so forth. So we have to take accounting of the very limited opportunities we have, in fact, to develop commercial property.
All right.
And be honest about it.
Thank you. Councilor Downs, this is a related matter, traffic. It's terrible, right? I think we can all agree. The traffic in the city is just getting worse by the week. What can be done, if anything?
Yeah, well,
And is bringing in more people the answer?
So
Seem
the
not.
way that other cities have reduced the amount of traffic is to bring destinations closer. That includes the place you live. Because if we don't, we have folks to the north, the south, and the west of us driving through Newton to get to the places they want to be. 70% of the traffic on Needham Street is pass-through traffic. So partly it's making sure that you can, as a Newton resident, use your local street for your local needs by making it safer to walk and bike and use other micromobility and transit. And part of it is going to be building your destinations closer together so that people don't have to drive. Because what we're doing right now is forcing people to drive.
Paul, would you agree with that assessment? Or what is your thought?
I'd like to speak to the issue of the commercial, only because if
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I would just tell you that the city has had a procedure where commercial properties are taxed on an income basis. They're not taxed on the valuation of the property. Secondly, that they're 11% of the total population in Newton and pay 20% of the taxes, because the city already taxes the commercial properties at 175% of what we charge the residential. Residential pays about 92% of the tax of their taxes, of their tax bill. So what I'm trying to say is that the commercial properties are already being taxed significantly, both by their income and also by the classification that we put on it. And I think that you let the general forces work as to how much commercial there is and how much residential there is.
Councilor Crosley.
Yes.
Albemarle Field, Albemarle Park, is one of the sites, and I guess is the primary site being proposed for a new senior center, New Cal, a multi-generational complex. Is this a good site?
Well, my understanding is that the mayor has reset the process, and as I think is appropriate, because there's a lot of pushback about Albemarle, and understandably so. It's the most heavily used park in the city, I believe, and imposing on existing recreational facilities as well is not a good idea. In addition, it's not centrally located, nor is it located near, close enough really to any village center so that it's walkable for the over 60 or over 65 population. Many of us can walk, but and can walk, much further than that.
Right.
But no, I think we really do need to reset the process. I also think the process was flawed, as earlier folks discussed.
The process itself, yeah.
I think it needs to.
Yeah.
The silver lining is people now across the city are paying attention to this proposal.
All right. I'm going to ask Andreae. Is there a site or two or three that you would think would be more opportunistic for a new senior center other than Albemarle?
Albemarle definitely has issues. And earlier in the process, I was alarmed to see that Cold Spring Park was on that list of possible sites. I believe, in fact, that might not have been fully legal either. No, I would like to see a senior center in a village center. Mostly because, and I think this is a benefit for Newtonville now, seniors park once and then they use the local businesses. They walk across the street. It's great.
So, and I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the Senior Center, which is an old branch library on Walnut Street in the Newtonville Business District, and it is in dire need of replacement, or if there was to stay on the site, a major overhaul. Alderman Coletti, is there a site that you think would be more accessible or more feasible for a new senior center?
I can think of 3 sites.
Okay.
First, in 1974, the city of Newton took a tennis court on California Street, and we gave the property to the Post 440. And there were certain conditions on the use of that property. And Post 440 now has been there for quite a few years and has really lost its total direction and function. It's now leasing spaces out and other space. We should first take a look at trying to build a new center there and include the veterans and also the seniors. Second site, the church right across the street from the existing senior center on Highland Street. We should approach the people there and see if it's very possible that we could acquire that property. And third, I think that the military on Washington Street,
The Armory?
the Armory, rather than having a 40-unit project go in there at this point, on Washington Street, someone's talking about the possibility
All right.
of buying it. The city should consider buying it and making it the senior center.
Let's get to a different question about, we spoke to the ward councilor candidates, the winter parking ban, which has been amended somewhat by Mayor Fuller's administration, but is still seen by many people as being ludicrous. What is your thought? Should it be eliminated?
It
Would
was
you-
extended, and perhaps it should be eliminated, and it was the city council who took that action and amended the ordinance under the...
stand corrected. yeah.
That's okay. Councilor Albright is in the audience. I wanted to give her due credit. And yes, I think it places a hardship on many parts of our community not to be able to park on the street when there's not a snow emergency, and we certainly can call a snow emergency. I think we need to work this through a process throughout many of because our neighborhoods are so different across the city, but I think we need to move into the future on this one.
Let me ask Councilor Downs this. Wouldn't it be feasible, do you think it would be feasible to eliminate that winter parking ban and just have it as an ad needed? We know, for example, a big snowstorm's coming. We're going to have to prohibit parking on street. We live in, the 21st century. We have email alerts. We have, robocalls. Couldn't something like that replace the winter parking ban?
Technologically, for most people now, yes. However, there's also technologically, we could also do permits to permit on-street parking overnight, but for a fee. It's the free storage of cars all night, all day, every day on our streets, which we, the taxpayers, pay for, whether or not we drive, that I find is not fair to those people who don't own cars and or don't need to park them on the street. And I think we could well put in a fair system where you pay for the value of the space you're taking and move it in the winter if there's a snow emergency.
All right, thank you very much. Would you like to comment
Sure.
on this as well, Paul?
I would just like to remind everybody that when we made a decision to go to automated trash collection, one of the biggest concerns was, where do people put their trash cans on a winter day when there's obviously snowbanks? So the point is, if you've got a car parked there and you've got your trash on top of snowbanks, how the city is going to pick up your trash. Number two, if the streets are narrowed down because people are parking on the street, don't call the city the next morning and say why my street wasn't plowed, because the plows can't get up your streets. And if you think about the number of fires that happen in the winter, imagine the fire truck trying to get up your street and lay the hose down to put the fire out and save you in your own house when your neighbor's parked all over the front of your house. So those are three issues why it's so important during the winter that the streets be open so the city can maintain the streets.
Fine, that's a fair question. Webster Woods, I think, do you support the mayor's move to take this by eminent domain, Councilor
Yes.
Crosley?
Yes, I do. There's an enormous support across the community for this. It has been in the city's open space plan that we should acquire Webster Woods, and we should have acquired Webster Woods when the previous mayor had the opportunity to do that. There's some misinformation in the community, people thinking, why didn't we do it the first time, and now it's costing us so much more money and so forth. It's because that was a unilateral decision made behind closed doors. The council never knew about it until afterward.
What was the unilateral decision?
Not to acquire the Webster Wood, the portion
When
of Webster
the
Woods.
synagogue, when Michigan
the
Tefillah
synagogue went up
first
for
was
sale,
moving,
it
yeah.
came to the city first.
Okay.
the city and the previous administration said no. We learned about it afterward, after the university had made their bid and their offer had been accepted and so forth. So here we are. That's unfortunate, but we know that this section of woods literally cuts in half the one forest, it's like about 100 acres, that Newton has. It's a critical habitat for
Okay.
many species and a habitat
All right.
corridor.
Councilor Downs, are there any other areas, we don't have that many green spaces in Newton, which I think is why there seems to be a real consensus for the mayor's proposed taking. Are there any other areas, not necessarily through eminent domain process, but that the city could acquire that might benefit the community?
So we have an open space and recreation plan, which will need to be updated. And I haven't gone through it in any detail, so I am not familiar with what it says, but I believe we should go through a planning process for it. My main focus on open spaces has been about making our trails, putting our trails into better condition so our cross-country team aren't face planting, and also to make sure that there are connections to the community so you can access those parks.
Let me ask Alderman Coletti about getting back to the mayor's proposal to take by eminent domain.
I would just tell you this. When I first came on the board, the city made a proposal to take Martin Roach's property down in Newton Lower Falls. We paid $750,000 to buy an entire block of stores and tore them down and built housing on the site. Ultimately, Martin Roach sued the city, and he won a $7 million judgment in court and put the entire housing authority into receivership. And the city had to bail them out, as well as giving the land to the city of Newton, which they sold to Northland, where their Northland complex now stands on Route 16 in Newton. If we try to take this property for $15 million, its value is so much higher than that, you can expect a lawsuit that's going to take many years, and when we ultimately lose it, how much money will it really cost to acquire that land when I'm sure they'll probably keep it open as it is right now?
Let me follow up on that, then. What would your approach be?
Well, my approach is that we already have parcels of land like 17 acres on the novitiate property on Winchester Street, which we continue to allow the citizens to use as a victory garden, when ultimately, when we bought that land and we put that land aside, it was to build a school. So when people talk about not having a school site, we have 17 acres of land set aside for a school on Winchester Street. The most important thing is that we only spend about $32,000 a year in maintenance of conservation lands, and most of that goes for the conservation land in Chestnut Hill. Every other conservation land, including the one I abut, get absolutely no services.
Okay.
So we've got to make
Yep.
sure if you're going to buy this land, for the abutters who live next to it, you need to have a chance and a policy of being able to spend the money to take care of it, not just let wild
right.
animals live there.
Let's move away from Webster Woods for a little bit. And
I think we did.
Yeah. So let me just follow up briefly. So you are not in favor of taking that
No.
property by eminent domain?
Maybe under a pilot plan, Boston College would donate some of the land to the city in payment in lieu of taxes.
Do you think Boston College is doing enough for the city, Councilor Crosley? I think they pay $100,000, right, annually?
I think it's down to 60.
That's about it. There are very few nonprofits that pay anything in terms of pilots. We've been talking about it for decades, that this might be a way to more fairly distribute our resources, given that city resources are used pretty extensively to assist the colleges, particularly fire and police. They pay their water and sewer bills, as everyone does, but that's the limit of it. It's common knowledge, because it was in the mayor's report, that Boston College has been approached, and there have been many meetings with them. They are not interested in giving an inch at this point. So we can't actually speak about it any more than that at the moment.
Yep. Okay.
There's not been a vote taken, nothing like that, but we're keeping our eye on the ball.
Councilor Downs, there is some thought that there is a conspiracy where these high-density projects are being proposed in less affluent areas of the city. For example, Newtonville, Washington Place especially. You hear this time and time again. What is your thought on all that? Is that a conspiracy theory, or is that there's something to it?
There are a lot of conspiracy theories in Newton.
We like them, right?
And we do like them, and I don't subscribe to them. Look, on Washington Street and in Northland, we're looking to make these are areas that don't look like the rest of Newton. And one of the thoughts in looking to redevelop them is to make them look more like Newton, while retaining their economic diversity and by allowing a few more people to live there, and of course addressing the transportation issues. But it's all about bringing the rest of Newton along to what we in Waban to a high degree currently enjoy: tree-lined streets and relatively quiet and very walkable village center.
Alderman Coletti, let me ask you, if you had been on the board a couple of years ago now, would you have voted for the special permit for Washington Place?
To be honest with you, I did not follow the Washington Place. I would have taken the position that when I heard from the abutters on that location,
The Foster Street, I believe, residence?
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, normally, for instance, when I voted against the Stop and Shop on Needham Street, I got a petition with 980 signatures from the people from Newton Upper Falls. Even though I supported it, and I told them what the alternative was going to be, I voted against the Stop and Shop project over 10 years ago. So I would have listened to my constituents, even though they're Ward 2, I'm an at-large alderman, and would have taken their thoughts under consideration and voted however the neighbors wanted. And just on a rebuttal, I just wanted everybody to know, in 32 years I was on the board, I supported both Newton Wellesley and Boston College on every item that came before us. Why? Because both of those institutions employ over 3,900 employees. Many of those people are Newton homeowners. And they also pump, each of them, well over $15 million a year into the local economy.
All right.
I just want you to know why they're so important and why we shouldn't be looking for any more than what they already do.
I think Councilor Downs wanted to respond.
Yeah, I covered the establishment of pilot payments in Brookline by the former treasurer of Newton. And he set up a program based on what it actually costs the town of Brookline to provide services to those universities and nonprofits in Brookline, and asked that they make at least that they work with Brookline to build a plan to get to the point where they were paying their freight. And it's not that they're not great employers. That's fine. They're great employers at Harvard too, but they managed to give some amount of a much more generous pilot payment to the city of Cambridge and the city of Boston than any of our nonprofits have done in the city of Newton. I think we can do better.
Let me ask Councilor Crosley this. So when Seti Warren was mayor, he would propose something. I think he called them SILATs, services in lieu of taxes. Most people did not buy into that I spoke with anyway. Do you think that Mayor Fuller's doing enough to push getting some pilot funding?
I can't speak for the mayor. It's not something that we have had a discussion about.
Do you think she's doing enough, though?
I don't know about
right.
Conversations she may be having with any of these organizations.
So this is done behind closed doors, and you're not privy to the information. Okay.
We would be if she were making a proposal to us, or if we were going to be accepting a grant of some kind. It would come to finance, but it just hasn't been on the table.
Alderman Coletti, you had a point.
Yes, I would just say that in order to pass some of the developments that Robert Korff has proposed, public welfare and convenience is one of the critical items that they have to pass the threshold on in order to get the permit. I've spoken to other people and said that I cannot believe that we haven't already begun trying to speak with Mr. Korff about incorporating a senior center somewhere along Washington Street, since he's now bought all of the properties from Newton Corner all the way up to the bank in West Newton. I think that he can find some place in order to meet the public benefit, welfare and benefit
All right.
standard and build us a senior center.
Councilor Crossley, you wanted to respond?
I do. It's not the exact language in a special permit, public welfare and benefit. People talk about it a lot, but what we do is we look at all of the mitigating, the impacts of a development. We've been asking for more and more and more from our developers. There's a threshold at which there's no more to give. So what do we ask for? Affordable housing. We've been increasing the percentage.
Well, let me just question you on that. How do we know what that threshold is? I mean, you said that there's a threshold. How do we know that? What is that threshold?
It's very difficult, but we've been raising the bar over the entire 10 years I've been here, both in terms of high efficiency construction methodologies, in stormwater management practices, in the amount and type of affordable housing that we're requiring, in solar energy installations, traffic mitigation, heavy-duty traffic mitigation programs, traffic demand management programs, and cash payments to the city for area improvements. With Washington Place, for example, that was one big building at first. We said, no way, this needs to be scaled down. We wound up pulling two buildings apart, stepping them down toward the neighborhood, which seems appropriate, creating a public plaza between the first two, et cetera. So we're shaping, we're asking, we're pushing on quality, durable, energy-efficient construction and wise best practices for the community.
Andreae, did you have anything? We're running short, so you each will get to ask one of the other candidates a question. So, but just to wrap this up, did you have anything to add to this line of discussion?
No,
All right. Now we are running short, so we are going to have each of the candidates will get a chance to ask a question of one of the other candidates. As I said earlier, let's make it a question of one or two sentences rather than a statement. So let's start with former Alderman Coletti. Question to one of the candidates.
Well, one of the reasons I'm in the race is because I really feel that certain things are not being looked after. I would like to ask my colleague, Deb Crossley, as I drive down the streets, I see all these double poles. As I drive through West Newton Square for well over 3 years, I just about break an axle every time I try to drive through the streets. And when I see the leaking gas pipes underneath that have become the excuse for now telling citizens they can't actually connect to the gas system in the city.
Question.
I'd like to know, as chairman of public facilities, how are we going to resolve these issues? And maybe she needs a little help.
Okay.
As I mentioned to you in our debate, those are 3 questions, by the way. So, double poles. We formed a committee about 8 years ago with city staff, Mark Laredo and several others. Jason Sobel is our transportation planner, and he has been keeping a matrix of all of them across the city. We've made actually progress. What I mentioned during our debate is that the city fire department is one of them. You got to get about 6 or 8 or 10 different wires off a pole before you can move it. And we sometimes get backed up on the city communication systems. I agree with you. It's not what we want to have in our city. It's very difficult to work through the utility companies, but we have people on it. Gas leaks, we do not own the gas company. That is a public utility, inaptly named, I think, because we wonder what the public part of it is. But the leaks under our street are egregious. I'm actually a member of the Gas Leaks Alliance. I'm a liaison for the city of Newton to a 20-member community consortium who are pushing on National Grid. They meet with us, and our city, our DPW department is meeting monthly with them and with Eversource to better coordinate the work they do under our streets, because it is hugely frustrating.
Thanks, Councilor Crossley. Next, Councilor Downs, question to one of the 2 other candidates.
I am just appalled that we still have a $1 billion promise that we made to our current retirees and our present employees that has only recently begun to be funded. And so my question is for Councilor Alderman Coletti, how did we get here?
You know,
Good question.
I couldn't have asked for a nicer question. Let me tell you this. The city of Newton has over $300 million. We've pooled our money with the state in order to be able to get their benefit on the investment in terms of trying to make money on it. But we make less than 1% on the $300 million. So we have funds in our name. We did not join the state plan, so that we didn't have to give all of our money to the state in order to them have us bring us under their retirement umbrella. But the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts, including every state employee, does not have a fully funded pension system. Everybody is on what's called a pay-as-you-go system. And the city puts in $10 million to $13 million a year of our contribution toward the account. And also there's the funds that are generated by the investment. But that's our money. There isn't probably another city or town in Massachusetts that has their own money in the state pension system like we do.
So in a nutshell, Alderman, what happened? How did we get here over the past 20, 30 years?
We're halfway there, but let me ask you this. Have you paid your mortgage for the next 30 years? In other words, no. Everyone pays as you go.
All right.
And that's how the pensions
We are short
will
on
begin.
time. We're short on
The
time.
state will take care of the problem because they have the same problem.
All right. Let's wrap this up in terms of Councilor Crosley asking a question of one of the other two candidates.
A question for Mr. Coletti. Similar but different. 32 years, you were witness to the growing structural deficit, that the city was building up these huge liabilities, not paying into our city employee pension fund or health care funds nearly sufficiently, and there were no plans, my big issue, no plans whatsoever to even properly maintain or rebuild our critical infrastructure, leaving us enormous liabilities. As finance chair for 23 years, why did you not work to address any of this?
Okay.
Well, let me tell you something. We must have fooled the entire world because the city of Newton has maintained a AAA bond rating. It is only one of 15 communities, okay, in almost most of the eastern part of the United States, who by Moody's and all of the people who look at our costs and at how we run our city have said that we're better than about 99% of every other city and town in the United States. We have. At one point, we spent money and had our I&I, that's the amount of rainwater getting into our sewers, down to 30%. Under Deb Crossley, it went up as high as 63%. And we've seen, so what I'm trying to say...
You just can't make stuff up, Mr. Coletti.
That's not true. And I
You're
can
making
prove...
it up.
Where did you source that 63% from?
What I'm trying to say is our AAA bond rating stands for the way...
2010.
And also, while I was on the Board of Aldermen,
All right.
we built a new library and 2 new high schools. In other words, and we never went above 3%.
Alderman Coletti, no, you're going about 3 times as long.
Well, we went above
you
the
can
3%.
finish during your closing remarks, and I'm going to give Deb about 30 seconds to respond to that, and then we're going to move to the closing remarks.
Well, it simply isn't true. These facts and figures are available. Historical data is available through the MWRA. The data we had at the beginning of 2010, which is for the previous year, showed a 63% clean water going into our sewer system. Now, that's a really, I don't know what you want to say, weird thing to bring up here today, but the truth is our systems were falling apart.
All right.
They were failing, and there was nobody fixing them.
We are going to get to our closing remarks. We're going to keep them to a minute or less. You can address whatever issues you want or pitch a vote.
I would just tell you, most of you are homeowners, I'm sure. And when I first was elected, 1981, a little into my term, the city was going under a revaluation because Prop 2.5 was voted. And we had to reorganize the entire assessing department. That first year, we had over 8,800 abatement requests because people didn't like the values they had. Over these years, we've worked on it to get it down to the point where these days, in 2019, we have less than 30 abatement requests on 33,000 properties, to give you some idea how well we serve the citizens of the city. I would just tell you, tonight you didn't hear anything about overrides. You didn't hear anything about your taxes going up more than 4% almost every year for the last 67 years. Why you've seen 4% increase every year in your water bills. In other words, and there's a looming override, and the city has gone from what we had as a policy, 3% of borrowing, to now well over 12%. It's tripled and gone even higher. So the point is, you've got some debt service overrides coming soon that you don't know about. You've got an override coming soon that you don't know about. You've got collective bargaining agreements that haven't been settled for over 6 years with the Police Superior Officers Union. And you've got a
All right.
school department that's ready to go on strike like Dedham. So I think it's time that you take a look at some new leadership. Thank
All
you.
right. Councilor Downs?
So I'm going to make a pitch for your vote on November 4th. What is it again? November 4th.
5.
November 5th. You can vote on November 4th until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I am looking forward to serving as your counselor at large from Ward 5. I think this race comes down to stewardship and whether you want your tax dollars carefully managed and you want your infrastructure repaired. I think the record of the last 10 years and the years before that is fairly clear. And that's where I'll wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And finally, Deborah Crosley.
Thank you. I too would like your vote on November 5th. We have a beautiful community, and I say we are so fortunate to live here. Our serious challenges that we have to face and serious problems that we have to solve are going to determine what our community looks like today for our people today and future generations. We need, therefore, serious leaders willing to work hard and collaborative to build real solutions to these challenges. I and Andrea have a proven track record of getting good things done for our community. I'm very proud of the work that we've done together with 2 mayors and many city councilors to correct decades of fiscal mismanagement and poor or no planning, to put our city on a more solid financial footing, which we are, and ensure the continued health and well-being of our diverse and welcoming community. Please vote for us so we can continue to work together, not at odds, but together to keep Newton a great place to live for everyone.
Okay, thanks to all the candidates, former Alderman Paul Coletti, City Councilor Andrea Downs, and City Councilor Deb Crossley. Thanks so much. The school committee debate will be next.